This is the Radio Wolinsky Podcast. I'm Richard Wolinsky with new and archive interviews from the Probabilities and Book Waves, Art Waves programs on KPFA FM and Pacifica Syndication. Richard Chamberlain, who died at the age of 90 on March 29, 2025, achieved fame as the heartthrob star of the 1960s medical drama Dr. Kildare, and went on to a successful career as an actor in the TV miniseries The Thornbirds and the original Shogun, as well as the Richard Lester Three Musketeers films and Peter Weir's The Last Wave, also other TV series and films, and on stage in My Fair Lady and other shows. In 2003, he came out of the closet in his memoir, Shattered Love, and I had a chance to interview him on June 10, 2003, while he was in the KPFA studios on his book tour. This book, Shattered Love, is a memoir that also talks about your own spiritual growth and change, and we'll talk a little about that. But what seems to be getting the most attention is your coming out of the closet. Insofar as I know, most people knew that anyway.
I think it was sort of known in the business, but I don't think the general public was too aware of it. I hope not, anyway, because I was a leading man, you know. I may not have been cast in some of these things if it were generally known. And so I played the game, and it was kind of fun, actually.
When you say you played the game, when you have to be closeted, and,
yes.
And in this case, insofar as I know, it's not merely Richard Chamberlain, but all of the people who work in and around Richard Chamberlain.
Yes.
You're not one person. You're maybe 100 people
yes.
at that point.
Yes.
What is it like on the inside looking out?
Well, first of all, you're working very hard, and I was working on the kind of things I loved to do. I loved acting. I loved the whole business. I loved being famous. I loved the whole trip. But you just keep your mouth closed about your personal life. In interviews, you have to be rather careful. And I got very good at fencing with interviewers. And if you go to a premiere or a Hollywood party or something, you take one of your girlfriends. You don't arrive with a guy. And it's just what you do. In terms of my own personal discomfort, I was as homophobic as the next guy. I mean, it's something I absorbed as I was growing up from the culture. And so I didn't like that part of myself. And I had stories about it, that I had learned from the culture, that it was bad. And so I had a double motive, really, for living this sort of double life.
Anyone who finds themselves realizes at whatever age that they're gay has to make a lot of decisions about what they're going to do about it. If you're in a profession where it affects you, it becomes even more difficult.
Yes, indeed. Talk about late bloomers. It wasn't until I was writing this book just a few months ago that I came to this realization that it's a total non-issue. And the freedom of that is really wonderful.
Before you met your partner, Martin,
yes,
the AIDS crisis was coming in. How did you deal with that? What kind of fears went through your head at that particular time? It's not in your book.
AIDS sort of came into the picture around the early 80s, I think.
Right, like 82, 83.
Martin and I were living together in 77.
So it wasn't that much of an issue.
So it wasn't that much of an issue. Thank God.
How about dealing with gay friends, or were you closeted so that didn't even happen there?
No. I had some gay friends. It's funny, we probably 2/3 of our friends are straight and maybe 1/3 gay, but we lost a couple of very dear people to AIDS, and it was heartbreaking. But not as many as some people, thank goodness, because I don't know why. But anyway, we lucked out in that area.
Richard Chamberlain, your career got off to, as I said, a big start with the break in Dr. Kildare,
yes.
which, according to your book, was fairly unexpected. I mean, you went in there and you didn't even know what was going on. You were pretty much starting out.
The show felt really good to me, and I thought it could make it. The movies had been so successful, and the people working on the pilot film, for instance, were first rate. I was the greenest person around. Raymond Massey was playing Dr. Gillespie, and he was wonderful to me, but what a pro, and I was this little green kid. But I was dazzled by the instant success of it. Yeah, I was really overwhelmed by it in the beginning. It was amazing. And unfortunately, we were working so hard and such long hours that I managed not to get too big a head about it.
There was a time in the late 80s I was friends with an actress named Joyce DeWitt, and Joyce told me that the moment Three's Company became a hit, she kind of moved from one crowd, being part of the masses, into this special world, and the only way to survive is if everybody takes you in. Did you find that?
I was on good relations with the people in the business, but I always discovered that my own friends are mostly not in the business. And consequently, when I was with them, I was just a regular person. So I experienced both. I experienced being phenomenally successful to one bunch of people and just another guy to my friends.
How did it feel at a certain point walking down the street and eyes would just go, snap open?
It was amazing. It was totally amazing. I couldn't go to a supermarket. I couldn't do it, without being kind of deluged with people, unless I was in some kind of disguise. But mostly I protected myself against that by not seeing it. When I walked down the street, especially when I was more in the public eye, I would just not see. They'd say, people, if I was talking with somebody or walking with somebody, they'd say, "Did you notice, people are really turning around and doing it?" No, I don't even see it. And that was a kind of self-protection also, I think.
What about in restaurants? Did people come up to you frequently and say, and how did that feel after a while? I mean, at first I'm sure it felt terrific.
It feels terrific in the sense of, especially when it's all new and novel. There are two problems. One is there's a kind of rudeness about being interrupted while you're lifting a fork to your mouth. And also I found that people who were very nice to me, oh, Richard Chamberlain, oh, Dr. Kildare, oh, gosh, so nice to see you, would totally ignore everybody else at the table, of course. Or worse, they'd turn to somebody at the table and say, "Are you anybody?" Which is really hard for the people who you're sitting with. So I learned to try to protect my friends against that kind of unconscious rudeness.
How do you protect them?
Well, good question. As I was saying that, I thought, how did I do that? And I can't quite remember. But at least taking care of the people you're with. For instance, if I take a date to a function and then get sort of taken up by the press or people, I had to be told that, wait a minute, I have to take care of my date and be sure she's introduced and all that stuff. A couple of dates got angry with me about that from the beginning.
Yeah, but it's tough. I mean, you're rich and famous, and you're doing all that, and at the same time, the world has closed to you. I mean, you can't just walk down the street as a mess.
That's a problem. And I like now living in Hawaii and being more or less anonymous. People just don't care there, and it's very nice to be able to go in to a supermarket in the shorts and T-shirt that you wore to bed and buy something, unshaven, and nobody cares. That's good. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the people that you worked with. Now, early on, you worked with Raymond Massey.
Yes.
At that particular time, you'd been studying acting. You'd done acting in college. This was your first big break. You were, 26 years old?
25.
25 years old. How intimidating is it the first time you work with someone who, my God, it's Raymond Massey?
I had worked with him once before on an Alfred Hitchcock.
Right.
And we liked each other. So when we were actually doing Kildare, he was extremely kind to me. Never flinched when I screwed up, as newcomers do. And the crew was really good and really friendly also. So it began to feel like home quickly, even though I had a tremendous amount to learn as an actor.
During those days, I mean, it may be different now, but you did many more shows per season than they have now.
Yes.
A typical week, how much time off did you have?
Almost none, because we'd work about 12 hours, 5 days a week. And then I'd often go to singing lessons and dancing lessons and things like that afterwards, try to grab a bite in between. And then you've got to learn your lines for the next day. And on weekends, it was mostly learning the next script. There would be, of course, some time off and some good times with friends and things, but it was fairly overwhelming. And I was in almost everything as Kildare, and we did it for 5 years. So I had to be really, really careful about taking care of myself and not doing much else.
What happened when you got a cold? How did you deal with that?
Well, you'd take antihistamines and go through it. I think I missed one day's work in 5 years.
And during that time, you were also doing films. You did Joy in the Morning as well.
Yeah, yeah. And so in these 6 or 8 week breaks we'd have between seasons, the studio, I was under contract to MGM. They'd put me in these little movies like Twilight of Honor, and Joy in the Morning actually was kind of a nice movie, and Thunder of Drums. And if there was ever a gap in the production schedule during producing, they'd send me off to New York or Philadelphia or someplace to do publicity trips. So I was a busy guy.
How cranky did you get?
Not very. I didn't have enough self-confidence to get very cranky. You know, you have to have a certain sense of yourself to start bad-mouthing people or making trouble. And I was always so doubtful of my own worth that I tended to be reasonably cooperative.
How did you deal? I mean, here you were, one of the most handsome people on television at the time. Were you aware of that?
It's funny about being reasonably good looking. You look in the mirror and you see flaws. I've talked to so many people who are like this. But I was aware that in certain photographs and in certain scenes, I looked really good. And I thought really that's why I had the career. So I was very vain and addicted to youth. The minute I saw, a new little crease or wrinkle coming, I was terrified because I thought, the minute youth left me and the good looks left me, I would be finished. Luckily, they didn't leave for a long time.
They left long enough for you to learn how to act, I guess.
Yeah.
When you did The Slipper and the Rose, that was your first musical? Is that correct?
Yeah, I guess so. I'd made some records while I was doing Dr. Kildare, and I took singing lessons and things like that. Slipper and the Rose was maybe the first all-out musical film I ever did, yes. It was great fun. Really fun. And the dancing stuff was fun, too.
You also worked with several other extraordinary people. You worked with Katharine Hepburn.
Yes.
Was she approachable?
Yes. Yes, but she wasn't always around. For instance, most of us lived at the Waldorf Hotel in Cap Ferrat, which is a glorious hotel. And I used to sit around and listen to these amazing people, Yul Brynner and all these people, tell their stories. But she always had a villa of her own. She liked to be in bed by 8 or 8:30, so she would take off right after work. And then in the morning, she'd go for a swim. This was like at dawn. And then she'd ride her bicycle to location after she'd had her steak. And I asked her about that one. She said, I like to feel better than anybody, she said. But yeah, on the set between scenes and things, she was fascinating to talk to. I remember this was a scene we were on a park bench, and she had just rescued me or something, and I was lying with my head in her lap. And we had to be there for lighting and stuff. And so we got into this conversation. She started fooling around she was fascinated by my hair. It had been streaked with blonde streaks. She was fascinated. So she's fooling around with my hair. And then she looks at my ears. She says, little pig ears close to the head. She said, just like mine. It shows that you're very selfish, she said. She was great. And she talked about, she always had chocolates. She was always eating chocolates, and she had perfect teeth. And that she had also fed chocolates to her little brother, and his teeth all rotted and fell out, but hers were perfect.
And Yul Brynner, he was a raconteur as well. I mean,
Yeah, he loved to talk about his exotic, I think he made it all up, his exotic Oriental beginnings and being parts of the circus and all that. He was in incredible shape, claimed he never worked out, said it was a hangover from the old days when he was doing the circus work. He was fascinating. It was the most amazing company of people.
What'd you think of the final film? That's Madwoman of Chaillot.
I liked it. I thought maybe it was a little too literary for film, a little too much talk, and maybe not enough action. And though Hepburn was terrific in it, I thought she was miscast, and that I see the Madwoman as incredibly frail, but with this amazing inner strength. And Hepburn is so strong to begin with, but she was good in it.
You also worked with Barbara Stanwyck.
Yes. Everything you hear, all the good stuff you hear about her is true. An amazing professional. She knew her lines from the very beginning. She played everything the same, always. In the first rehearsal, she was talking to the cameraman, so you will get that look, won't you? I mean, she was just phenomenal. But underneath that almost tough exterior, I think she was very, very vulnerable. There was a sweet, kind of shy little girl under there.
Did either Hepburn or Stanwyck talk about the early days in Hollywood much?
Hepburn talked about She talked about Spencer Tracy quite a lot. And his amazing concentration. She said she was in a scene with him once in a film at a restaurant table, and he knocked over accidentally his glass of water during the scene and never lost a beat. He cleaned it up. He put it all back during the scene, never fell out of character at all, which is pretty amazing. Pretty amazing.
Did these people always stick to the lines, or did they vary? How did that work?
The only actor I've worked with who didn't stick to the lines was Rod Steiger, who just made it up. He said approximately what was meant in the script, and it left you dangling because you never knew quite what your cue was. So all your attention went to him. It's an interesting ploy. All your attention went to him, and he became the focus of the scene.
You also worked with Jason Robards.
Yeah.
What was that in?
That was in Julius Caesar.
That disastrous.
It was disastrous. And he knew, it's funny about Jason, he knew it was a disaster from the first couple of days and just sort of checked out, which I thought was curious for such a brilliant actor, and he kind of phoned in his performance. Charlton Heston was Brutus, and Antony, Mark Antony, and wouldn't put his clothes on. He thought he looked so fabulous naked that he played practically the whole film naked. But it was an awful film. It was I don't know why it didn't work, but it didn't.
Who was the director of that, do you remember?
Oh, I can't remember.
And
Gielgud was in it too. A lot of good people. Richard Johnson.
Well, you mentioned Gielgud was a trip to work with.
Oh, amazing. Absolutely amazing. But I was kind of shy. One of the things I regret is that I was rather shy with these great people and didn't engage them as much as I could have, which is too bad because now most of them are gone.
You also worked with Jose Ferrer?
Yes, in The Swarm. And he was so great. He was such a great Cyrano in that film. But we were rather embarrassed about doing this film, but Irwin Allen had paid us so much money that everybody was doing it. That's how he got all these good people to work for him.
So what happened? If somebody calls you up and said, I'll pay you virtually anyway, do you just kind of bite the bullet and if the money's there, or how does that?
Well, often, not always. But yeah, you're, especially if you've done some good stuff and have a reasonably good reputation. Yeah, once in a while if somebody says, I'll pay you a bundle to do this B film, you do it.
And you worked on one of those high-priced B films with Paul Newman and Steve McQueen. That's Towering Inferno.
Yeah, Towering Inferno.
Wasn't William Holden in that one, too?
Yeah, William Holden, Fred Astaire, Jennifer Jones, all kinds of fascinating people.
Did you get a chance to talk to Jones or Astaire?
Astaire a little bit, yeah. He also did a Kildare once, so I knew him a little bit. But interestingly enough, he liked hanging out with the crew because there were all these huge megastars hanging around the set all the time, including O.J. Simpson. But I noticed that Fred seemed easier with the crew types because he was perfectly able to hold his own with anybody, kings, queens, megastars, anybody. He was rather self-effacing, rather very sweet man.
I talked to, actually, it was one of the authors of The Glass Inferno, one of the books that became The Towering Inferno. He said one of the amazing things about being in Hollywood is how nice everyone is, mainly because they're selling themselves. Did you find that generally true?
Yeah, I think actors, well, it may be true of some producers, but actors and performers are very used to putting over their image. I know I spent most of my life doing that. It's not that we're totally phony, a little phony maybe, but not totally phony. But you're used to the feeling the necessity of being charming, and you never know who you're going to charm. It might be somebody who's producing your next film.
What happens when you're just in a foul mood?
Well, there are actors who don't hide that part either. But you have to be very good and very successful to get away with it.
You wrote at one point in your book, Shattered Love, Richard Chamberlain, that at times you were living your life as a fictional person.
I think in many ways most of us do that. Most of us have a self-image, whether we're actors or not. And we relate to people as this image of ourselves and relate to the other person's image. And often it happens even with husbands and wives and parents and children. You see what you want to see, and you put over who you want them to see. It's a kind of human foible that's costly, but it's also very, very tiring, especially if you're me and think you're a bad person and are trying to pretend to be a good person all the time. That's a very tiring charade to. It's enervating, and now that I don't have to do that anymore, it's great.
When you say you thought you were a bad person, was it just because you were gay, or what was?
No, it was a combination. I think I came into this life with a considerable lack of self-esteem, and then when the gay issue came in, I thought that was really terrible because that's what I learned from my culture. So I thought I was, I say, a bad person. I knew that I wasn't, I wasn't a criminal, but I thought there was this part of myself that I simply couldn't reveal because it was not acceptable, period. And that's, of course, just a story in my head.
Actors use whatever's in them when they're working.
Yes.
Did you just hide that, compartmentalize that part of yourself, or did it come out? Did it come out and say Aramis at a little bit? Do you think?
Well, he was very effete and kind of stylized, but he was very straight. He was seducing everything in sight, female, that is. Sometimes, I suppose, it can come out a little bit in comedy or a character part, but mostly you try to hide it and be, well, if it's not a part of the character, it's not a part of the character. Tchaikovsky in The Music Lovers was gay and hated it and was extremely troubled by it. And so that, of course, I could play easily.
But did you have a problem accepting the role knowing that he was gay and tortured?
No. I thought I was thrilled to work with Ken Russell. I liked the script a lot, and I thought it was just an acting assignment. I mean, I thought that's what it would appear to be.
When that happens and you get deeper than you expect, how do you feel coming out of it?
I've never had trouble coming out of characters or leaving them behind in the evening. That's not true. I remember when I was playing Cyrano de Bergerac, I used to miss him when I left the theater because I liked him so much. I thought he was such a neat guy. Same with McKeague in Centennial. But mostly I've been able to leave character. After the Music Lovers, I was totally exhausted, however. Ken is really difficult to work with. You're
listening to an interview with Richard Chamberlain, whose memoir is Shattered Love. I'd like to focus in on a couple of films, but before I do that, you did something which did not get released, but was actually quite fun. It was called Return of the Musketeers.
Oh, it didn't get released even? I didn't want to do it. I really didn't want to do it. I knew sequels were not good, and I didn't like the script. And finally, they offered me so much money, and reduced my time on the film to about 2 weeks. So I did it, but it was a very uncomfortable. It was massive deja vu. We had the same costumes with same cast, same everything, practically the same story as the original Three Musketeers, which was a joy to do. And I was not unhappy that it was not released.
Well, Roy Kinnear died during the making of the film.
That was a terrible thing, and it was, I suspect, the product of carelessness. He hated horses. He was terrified of horses. It was in a long-distance scene that he didn't even have to be riding in, and he was killed, and it was a terrible, terrible loss. If you want to really hear about that, ask Michael York sometime, because he was there. Roy Kinnear was a very funny, very sweet man with a family and everything, and it didn't need to happen. It was tragic, especially for a junk film.
The two films that I would put up as perhaps, in many ways, the most important work you did, one is The Last Wave by Peter Weir.
Yeah, I loved working on that. Peter was just a kid then. He had done Picnic at Hanging Rock, which was a wonderful film, and full of that dark mystery of the Australian continent. But he looked like a choir boy, a little English pink-cheeked choir boy. He was charming. But I knew that there were other sides to him, having seen Picnic. And he was just terrific to work with. And he used to play, if the scenes didn't require dialogue, he used to carry this ghetto blaster around and play Pink Floyd, really heavy-duty stuff to kind of get us in the mood. I loved working on that film. I loved working with the Aborigines. They were, fascinating, wonderful people.
At that particular time, you've already started your own spiritual quest.
Yes.
So that kind of fit in.
Yes, it did.
Were you aware going into it that it would?
Yes, somewhat. The main character, the character I played, was actually more like Peter. There was that aspect. And there again, I wish I'd talked more to Nanjiwara and some of those marvelous Aborigines who had a connection with nature like the old Hawaiians that we can't even begin to fathom now.
You also worked for 6 months on Shogun.
6.5, actually.
6.5 months.
In Japan,
with Toshiro Mifune. Yeah. Living in Japan at that point, as time went on, I guess, did they film that one in sequence at all?
No.
So you had to jump back and forth.
Yes.
How is that when you're working on a project with that kind of length, jumping from, particularly since your character changed so much,
yes.
and you were changing, having to live in Japan
yes.
that much?
Yes. Well, you just do it. It's one of the fascinating tricks of film acting. Going to the funeral of the person you haven't killed yet, or the wife you haven't met yet, or doing a love scene with somebody that you've just met that morning. It's a technique that becomes kind of unconscious. You've studied the script. You know where your character's going. You haven't experienced a lot of those things yet, actually, on the set with the other actors, but you know where it's going. And, of course, the director can be very helpful. But it's a fun Chinese puzzle to try to put together.
How surprised do you get in those situations? I mean, where the other actor just does something that's completely unexpected. Can you recall any incidents?
The famous incidents in Petulia, which I wasn't involved with, but when I arrived on the set, Richard came up to me, Richard Lester, the director, and said, "You won't believe what I got yesterday." He used to keep the cameras going all the time and do close-ups when you thought he was doing long shots and all that. And there was a scene between George C. Scott and Shirley Knight where he has a bag of cookies and he lobs it onto the bed during the scene. Well, in the first take, Shirley Knight was turned away from him and he threw this bag of cookies and it exploded on her back. And unbeknownst to anybody, Richard had a close-up camera on her at that time, and she didn't know what to do. She didn't break the scene, but she was totally lost for a while and turned around and of course, moments like that are pure gold in cinema. You just long for moments like that. And Richard was like a little kid about that. Those things like that do happen now and then. Mifune was always startling, just because he was so great. I can't think of a particular instance, except when he was riding in on the horse, but I don't know if you have time to tell that story.
Well, that was when he just rode in as fast as possible,
yes,
stopped on a dime.
Yes, and I knew he was afraid of horses. Or rather uncomfortable on them, and I thought we were all dead. He came in at such a clip.
Were you able to talk to him at all? You said he knew more English than he let on.
We didn't talk much, just a little bit. But you almost wouldn't dare approach him on the set. In real life, if he was in his Western clothes, he was rather diffident and almost shy. But when he put on those samurai duds, he was unapproachable. He was going to growl and nobody would approach him unless they had to.
He was Toranaga then.
Yeah, he was Toranaga.
Let's talk for a minute about the writing of Shattered Love. Mm-hmm. You wrote the whole book yourself,
yes,
no
I did.
ghostwriter.
No. They wanted me to, in the beginning when I didn't know how to write a book, and it was kind of disorganized and strange, and they said, you've really got to work with somebody on this guy. And I even tried it for a while, but it didn't work. And so I said, no, man, I'm going to learn to do this. And Martin was very helpful too, but and we pulled it together and organized it, and I think it turned out reasonably well.
How long did it take to write?
A couple of years, not 8 hours a day, but fairly constant.
Have you been doing any acting recently?
Not much. I was totally involved with this book, and I was glad actually not to have too many interruptions. I'm going to do a play after the book tour is over in Massachusetts.
What's the play?
It's called The Stillborn Lover. It's by Timothy Findley, a rather well-known Canadian writer.
You also performed as Henry Higgins in My Fair Lady.
Yeah.
It surprised a lot of people.
Yeah, that was a great experience. And then I did Sound of Music on Broadway. Both were on Broadway and both toured.
You mentioned something I found rather fascinating there, and that's that outside of one or two cities, no matter where you played, it was like you'd been to the same place because America's become so homogeneous.
Yeah, most of the theaters we played were big ones in the downtown areas of these cities, and there'd be malls and all that stuff around, and cineplexes and all that. And the cities looked exactly alike. The malls were exactly alike. The cineplexes were exactly alike. And I was shocked, actually, by how the globalization of America, the statalization or something, has taken place. And it's a pity. I miss little shops that are one of a kind, or bookstores that are one of a kind, or cinemas that are one of a kind.
Richard Chamberlain, you achieve a certain amount of fame, and you wonder what you're going to do with it. And in your case, you moved into a lot of spiritual areas. A lot of people move into political areas. Mm-hmm. Do you ever get involved in politics?
No. I'm awfully worried about politics these days, but I wouldn't know how to do anything about it in particular. I'm more interested in my aptitude is more suited to being interested in how we live our lives and how I live my life and how we might live them more fully. And that interests me a lot.
People in Berkeley are specifically scared about what's happening in Washington and how that might impinge on those lives that they want to live. Yeah. And I'm sure that as a gay man, you have the same kind of fears that the rest of us have.
Yes. It's the first time in my life I've been afraid as an American. I'm just strangely afraid of the current administration and the current super conservative sort of acceptance of some kind of militarized life that they have planned for us. It really scares me.
It scares all of us as well. And one thing that I've been curious about in talking to various people who do deal with their own spirituality is, how do you deal with being in the world and out of the world at the same time? I mean, it's kind of like you can't just sit there and meditate when this is going on because it is part of your world.
Yes. I don't want to live out of the world at all. I want to be in the now, in the present moment, as fully as possible and as truthfully as possible. As I say, any little tiny contribution I can make, I think, is in the area of this book. It's in the area of suggesting that people really think about how they're living their lives. Life is moving so fast, and we tend not to think about it. We tend to totally accept for instance, all the negative stuff we're feeling, all the resentments, all the hatreds, and in my case, this particular fear, instead of really looking into them and trying to understand them.
But even if you understand that fear, it doesn't make John Ashcroft go away.
No, it doesn't make him go away, but it changes my relationship to him in the sense that being afraid of him or even disliking him or hating him or resenting him gets me nowhere. Understanding him might get me someplace.
Where does it get you think?
Well, it would get me into knowing how, in some small personal way, to deal with this. The letters I might write, the people I might talk to. Also, I think when we change as human beings, when we encounter truth in ourselves, and when we actually encounter love in ourselves, I think humanity changes that tiny little bit.
Most people I know, despite what they might say or, politically or whatever, they would love the kind of success you had, mm-hmm. and even to be able to find out that it's empty on the other side.
Well, it wasn't empty, but it wasn't everything. It wasn't enough. It wasn't love. It wasn't open-heartedness. It wasn't freedom.
And now, if you went back, is there anything you would do really differently other than, say, talk more to these famous stars?
Yes, that is one of the things I would definitely do. But mostly because I've come to this realization that I'm not a bad person deep, deep down into my bones. And the sense of freedom about that is so wonderful that, in a sense, I wouldn't have changed anything. For instance, my relationship with my father, which was exceedingly difficult, I wouldn't have changed that because I learned to forgive him, and I learned what forgiveness was, and I even learned to love him, which is an amazing happening in my life. Probably most things happen for a reason. Not everything, but most things.
And you've been in a long-term relationship, though you can't get married.
Yeah. Isn't that peculiar? So we've spent we love houses, and our financially and everything, we've worked together for so long, 26 years, and it's going to come to fruition in this wonderful house we're going to build. And if I kick the bucket, he's got to move because the government steps in and takes half our estate because we don't have the husband-wife contract.
Now that you've reached this point, are you ready to tackle the roles of older people, things like
Oh, yeah,
Pierre?
absolutely. Absolutely. I did an independent movie called The Pavilion, and I played this cantankerous old swindler sniffing his cocaine and screwing his daughter and all this stuff. And it was great. It was really fun. It's much more fun, I think, doing character work than leading men. There's just more room for creativity and freedom. Well, I can't say this totally, but I almost wish I did look older because I see a lot of older-looking actors getting roles that I would like to do.
If you had a choice and there were like a couple of roles in theater that you could just do right now, what would they be?
I might do Prospero in The Tempest. Anything zany, anything flamboyant, anything character-ish and fun and kind of loose, I would like to do.
Do you ever see yourself doing series TV again?
I could imagine that, especially if it was shot in Hawaii. I could imagine that if I didn't have to carry the show and if it was a really interesting, fun part.
Richard Chamberlain, you have any intention of writing another book?
I'm going to keep writing because I learned so much doing it. There's something about sitting down at that blank page and having to think carefully enough about something to make it worth writing down. And I found that seemed to attract insights. The process seems to attract insights, and I like insights. And so I'm going to keep writing, but whether it turns out to be another book, I don't know.
You ever want to tackle fiction?
I don't think so.
Because?
Because I don't think I'm creative in that way. I can't imagine creating what you're going to interview Margaret Atwood. I can't imagine creating a whole world and peopling it with these fictions whom you invent and who then take on life and tell you who they are and all that. I can't imagine being that brilliant.
You've been listening to a 2003 interview with actor Richard Chamberlain, who died at the age of 90 on March 29, 2025. It was recorded in the KPFA studios June 10, 2003, while he was on tour for his memoir, Shattered Love. Until next time, I'm Richard Wolinsky. Radio Wolinsky usually posts every week on Sundays. You can write to me either at bookwaves@hotmail.com or richard@kpfa.org. You can find other Radio Wolinsky podcasts in the Area 941 section of kpfa.org, or you can go to bookwaves.homestead.com or richardwolinsky.com for a complete listing of all digitized recordings. You can subscribe to Radio Wolinsky via iTunes or follow Richard Wolinsky radio shows on Facebook.